Critical Blast, where pop culture gets blasted.
And good evening, everybody. I am RJ Carter, Senior Managing Editor here at CriticalBlast.com. And tonight, we're not going to talk about a crowdfunded comic. We're going to talk about a different comic, which may or may not get crowdfunded sometimes. I don't know. We have Bill Williams with us, who is the mastermind behind Punchline. That Punchline, not the other Punchline or the other Punchline, which will be some of the discussion tonight. Bill, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. I think technically it's a legion of punchlines.
It is. It's and no joke.
Yeah. That was not my call on the name. To give you a little background on the thing, I ran into Matt Weldon at a small convention, and like most writers, I was thinking, oh my God, that guy can draw. I've really got to trick him into working on one of my books. So we got together another year or two later when we talked, and I said, look, I've got this pitch for this book. And he said, what else have you got? And then I told him the second pitch, and he goes, okay, back to that first one. And my pitch was, it's a story about a superhero who gets fired and has to train her replacement. So they don't quite get along. So they're sort of fighting with each other as they're fighting bad guys. So it's kind of the classic setup, like The Odd Couple with superpowers or Lethal Weapon or something like that. So you've got a little bit of friction between your two lead characters, and then friction with, bad guys that they're punching. But the name of the book, Punchline, and the name of the lead character, Versima, that all came out of Matt Weldon's noggin.
So the book is named Punchline for any particular reason, or it's just the...
We thought it sounded cool.
Okay, so it doesn't say about anything in the book, though.
Not as far as I know. I may get to it. I may have somebody ironically say, and that's the punchline at some point, but no, it's just, we like that name for a book. It's kind of cool. At the time it was, there's a stand-up comedy movie with Sally Field and Tom Hanks from the 80s or 90s that had the title Punchline. I was like, yeah, all right, that's fairly unclaimed. And then since then we've had people step all over our IP, but that's what people do.
It's a strange thing, trademarks and how they get used and what they're used for.
I talked to an attorney online, and I said, look, our book was Antarctic Press's Free Comic Book Day book in 2019. It's not like we were hiding. They shipped 50,000 copies of that thing. They should have been able to realize, oh, wait, somebody else has already used that name. Let's not do that. But the attorney said, even if you had deep pockets and felt like fighting forever, it would still be, a draw / untotally winnable at this point. So, I've tried to take a live and let live with the Joker's girlfriend stabby version of a Punchline character name. So, what are you going to do? Fight City Hall?
Well, it was one thing when you had a character.
Yeah.
Because, Marvel and DC both have a Sandman. Marvel and DC used to both have a Captain Marvel.
They all had Cobras.
Yeah, they got along fine. But now that DC has taken that extra step of giving Punchline a one-shot, now she's a title. Now she's a brand. And that's where it gets a little bit stickier with a comic book.
And I signed off on the proof for Punchline issue 11, and that'll come out the same month as the Punchline special from DC. So, fingers crossed they'll ship the same week.
That would be very cool. I know they're doing that cover with the Joker and Punchline, sort of that classic Alex Ross ballroom dancing thing he did with Harley Quinn. That's why I thought it would be hilarious if your cover was actually your lead character and one of the villains doing a ballroom dance pose, and just go ahead, put them side by side.
Sort of. We haven't had a whole lot of repeating villains yet. One of the things about Mel, the kind of cranky mentor to our hero, she doesn't really believe in leaving bad guys laying around. So, she explains it in terms of, if you put a bullet in the bad guy, it's problem solved. So it's a somewhat a clash of philosophy between the two lead characters.
This is true. They don't come back. Of course, this is comics. They come back all the time.
Yes. I work a day job where I'm the manager of a collectibles store here in Austin, Texas. And one of the things I did recently was I busted out a giant set of the Marvel Handbook from the 80s/90s. And they had a couple of issues full of the books of the dead, basically all the dead characters,
I
right?
remember that.
Most of them aren't dead anymore. So it should have been called the Book of the Temporarily Dead.
Yeah, slightly suspended.
Yeah.
Is Uncle Ben still even dead? I don't know anymore.
Oh, I don't know. That guy, I'm sure that somebody had the novel idea of making him a zombie in a Marvel zombie book, but you can't keep a good Uncle Ben down, I think.
No. So given the plot device that you described here, she's fired, she's training a replacement, that would seem to limit the scope of your storyline. Is Punchline intended to be a finite series, or?
Well, at one point I was talking with Matt and I said, hey, I know how I'm going to kill Mel. And he said, you can't do that. I said, why not? So we talked about that and I said, all right, fine. What it gave me a chance to do was kind of flesh out the world that Punchline exists in. One of the cornerstones of that world is the thought that, to steal something from Grant Morrison, maybe all stories are true. Maybe everything has a ring of truth in it. Maybe every God exists. Maybe every devil exists. So what I have is Versima and her mentor, Mel, are both members of the Daughters of Hercules. They both have a tiny fractional amount of Hercules' blood in their system, which gives them a cornerstone for their superpowers. So one of the things that they did, as I've been slowly rolling out the premise, is they met a bunch of the other Daughters of Hercules, and that has kind of an interesting world building aspect to it.
So they're all kind of cousins.
Yeah. Usually what happens is when one is ready to retire, she takes a series of tremendous wounds and, like Abensur dying in his spaceship, finds a suitable replacement and hands the powers on. Except, Mel's just too mean to die. So she, passes on the whole dying thing, sticks around.
So you mentioned that she's not retiring. Early on, you said she was fired.
Yeah.
How do you fire a superhero for malfeasance? I mean,
well, if you grant somebody powers, and then at some point you say, okay, your run is over, and they say, no, it's not, you have to fire them. So that's kind of the behind the scenes stuff on what's going on with that. This, I very much wanted to write a superhero book with some drama in it, and I wanted it to be kind of unlike anything I've read in the past 30 years. So this is a little bit different. It's kind of like if you watch the movie Cabin in the Woods. Yeah. The Cabin in the Woods stuff I found was not interesting. It wasn't anything we haven't seen 100 times. What I found fascinating was kind of the architecture behind what was going on screen in the cabin. And, that's kind of what I'm fiddling around with here in this book.
All right. So how much of the book do you have stretched out in your mind? I mean, you just proved issue 11's proofs.
Yeah. And issues in issues 12 and 13, which are pretty far along, I think issue 12 ships in January, probably in time with another DC book. Jessie has her test to see if she can keep the Punchline superpowers. So they go to a world where heroics are a foreign concept, and her task is to introduce some sort of heroic act to kind of break the ice so that Hercules can show up and be a badass and have fun and, spread the good word of Hercules. And it goes terribly off the rails and she ends up fighting a dragon. But, I wanted to write a superhero story kind of unlike other superhero stories where there's, living parents, positive role models, bad examples, just stuff you don't see a whole lot. I mean, I read a few modern comics, but it seems to me the modern aesthetic is let's find a way to make our beloved superhero evil for a while. Just that doesn't interest me at all.
Now, you work in comics, I'm assuming on the retail side as well.
Yes.
Do you see those kinds of stories sell at all? I mean, is there ever an uptick in sales because they do that? Or, I mean, what drives people to try it?
We run an interesting kind of store. I work at a place called Collectors Crossroads. We also have records and sports gear and high-end purses and furniture and video games.
That's different from Funko Pops.
Well, we've got a little bit of Funko Pops too, but it's a piddling little amount. And while we have a diamond account, we usually just use that for the statues. We don't really do weekly comics because my boss probably has the right opinion, but he said, the profit margin and the business model for weekly comics is just totally, blanked. I'm not going to do that. So we'll buy up collections of cool stuff and put them out. So, we don't have a lot of modern classics, but we've got, this past weekend, I sold one of those Strange Tales with the first appearance of Gamora. We've got an Amazing Spider-Man 300 on the wall, $298 and $299. We've got a lot of vintage stuff, but not a whole lot of, monthly stuff.
So you work for a comic shop where your boss doesn't carry your comic that you're an employee in because he's not buying the weekly comic.
Basically, I'm sort of fine with that. It's a little weird. I'm not a fan of crossing the streams like that.
It would be kind of weird to be behind the counter and always recommend, hey, have you tried Punchline?
Let me run around the counter and sign this for you. It's a little awkward.
So Hercules is still around then. I mean, immortal godlike powers.
Yep. So at some point, Hercules will appear in the book. He's appeared in flashback already, mostly when they're debating, what Hercules does, because Versima is a teenager who has a lot of superpower now, and she says, I don't want to kill bad guys. And Mel at some point says, when he showed up and ran into the Hydra, he didn't get it into a 12-step program. He killed it. That's what you do with monsters. So it's kind of an ongoing debate between the two of them.
Now, you mentioned also traveling to other worlds. This is a modern day setting, I'm guessing, but there's interdimensional, interplanetary, both.
I like the thought that the walls between the worlds are pretty thin. So there, after the trial, Jessie / Versima decides to try to set up her own super team so that everybody can be a little more efficient when they're out doing stuff. And a bad guy shows up and turns them all into chibis. So there's an issue coming where they're all the adorable chibi, body types. They're trapped in a mad toy genius's, workshop / castle for an issue. So yeah, it's I like the concept of a book where, any random crazy thing can happen.
Speaking of random crazy things, the Punchline characters have done crossovers with other Antarctic properties.
Yep.
Are they same universe? Is Antarctic same universe, or is it just that thin wall between worlds and we see each other every once in a while?
I think that we just try to have a good time and we haven't thought about the universe that much. I know that we're working on a Rags Punchline book, and I reached out to the guy who does the Beetle Girl comics because I like the design, I like the concept of found art. I talked with him, and Beetle Girl was in an issue. We just did a crossover with John De La Rosa's Meta Girl for the Flying Sparks book, and I ended up lettering that book and consulting with John on it as he was working on getting that done. So, that's one of the nice things about owning your IP is you can, trade it off with people back and forth.
All right. So you can do a crossover with Black Hawk, but in your own book, you wouldn't necessarily have, GI rabbits running around doing things. It would still be more.
I might. It kind of depends on things. I am much more comfortable loaning out my creations than taking somebody's creation in. I'm lettering Doug Ernst's next Soul Finder book, right? And he said, if you find something that doesn't really work for you, I'm like, he said, go ahead and write that page of dialogue, because I said a page needed some better dialogue. He goes, just go ahead and write that. I was like, It feels like I'm crossing the line, rewriting somebody else's stuff. But I'm comfortable loaning out other people's characters, and I struggle a little bit more to write other people's stuff.
Yeah. Well, you know your own character better than anybody else.
Yeah. I do some screenwriting from time to time, and that's one of the things that you do before you start writing pages is you write up a solid background for these characters. So that I know. And when I start writing other people's stuff, I'm like, I'm not sure exactly, where this character comes from.
Yeah, you'd have to immerse yourself in a kind of reading of the character to get the voice and the cadence and
yes,
down.
And that's one of those things in Brian's script. I've been reading that on the Punchline Rags crossover. He's got Mel in it, and Mel's just a total bitch in the story. And I was just thinking, she's usually mean to people, but she usually has a point to it too. So I may help him with some dialogue.
All right. Now, is that going to be a crowdfunded book, or is that?
God, I have no idea.
I don't know how some of these titles is like it's crowdfunding, but it's on the shelves. I don't remember it being crowdfunding. I see it in the store, so I don't know when crowdfunding comes into play with a lot of this stuff, and I don't know how Punchline gets crowdfunded.
So hold on a second. So with Punchline, we were crowdfunding it, and I've known Brian Denham for a long time, who's the editor-in-chief over at AP. And I went over and talked to them, and I said, this is a little awkward. Well, I've got this book that's crowdfunded, but we've done, all these issues of it. And they said, oh, this is awesome. We'd like to publish it. I'm like, okay. In some cases, when you're working on projects, it makes sense to crowdfund them. And in some case, you can work with a publisher like Antarctic Press. They're nice guys, but they're kind of hands off in a lot of ways. You tell them what you're going to come up with, you show them the product, and they're like, okay, tell us when it's done. I mean, they just they're not on you every week like a traditional editor would be. I've edited books I edited books for One First Comics and other companies before, and I've been the guy who's on the other end of that line going, hey, how you been? Yeah, great. You see the show? Yeah, where the blank are my pages? It's not that kind of relationship.
Well, with 11 going in and 12 being prepared, 12 is usually one of those magical cutoff numbers where a story, if not a 12-issue story, at least the latest story comes to a complete close. Are you looking at doing some sort of an omnibus collection for the first 12 issues, year one? Or?
No, we kind of blew up that model. The first collection was 5 issues. The second collection was 5 issues. It looks like the third collection is going to be about 5. So it would be about in the middle of the third collection whenever we get around to getting that done. But, Matt has been very successful. He did the art on a 56-page book that, like I said, Doug Ernst is doing. He's doing a Nexus, Bigfoot Bill, Lone Star crossover. Right. He's for a guy who just had his 4th kid, he's like the busiest guy in show business.
Yeah, I should get him on the next stream. I know that Mike Barron and Doug Tenaple are in to discuss the triple crossover. We're just waiting on Mike to say yay or nay and give a date. And
yeah,
if all 3 of them are in, then Matt's definitely got to come along and talk the whole thing up.
That'd be good. He's got a really interesting approach to drawing and a really interesting eye for detail. We had pitched this to Andy Schmidt and Source Point Press for a while, and then that we couldn't end up making a deal on that, so we ended up going with crowdfunding and then AP. And Andy said at one point, he said it was really smart having the lead character have long hair because Matt draws hair better than anybody else in the business. I'm like, yeah, he sort of does.
That's a tricky thing. Hair and noses are the hardest thing to pull off.
I did the inks on this issue of Punchline, so I spent a lot of time drawing hair and noses and every other body part.
One of the things that I've particularly enjoyed about all of these different independent books, crowdfunded or not, is how much more freely there's infighting all the time online, and it drives me nuts. But
yeah,
unlike Marvel and DC, there's still more free interaction between the creators when it comes to passing characters back and forth. So you can get some of the strangest crossovers, like the Bigfoot Bill Lone Star Nexus book that's coming out.
Like we probably have a half dozen images floating around in the net of either one of the Punchline characters and then GI Bunny, the Black Ops character by Tim Lim. Yeah.
So I was going to ask you, were there any more? Yeah, in fact, I think I got Common America.
Common America.
She might have been, but I can't remember who was all crossed over there.
They might hang out. We haven't really talked about it. I had lunch with Tim Lim and Matt today, and we might do something like that. The next thing that's coming out from us, aside from Punchline 11, is probably the Ninja High School Indie Wars comic that Ben Dunn put together. Matt has like a little 5-page story in there too. So it's Versima hanging out with some Ninja High School characters.
Oh, cool. Now, do you have any crossovers lined up outside of AP with more of these independent guys?
I haven't really thought about it yet. We haven't been pursuing it. We're open to it. I had written we'd been talking with Dynamite at one point about doing a Vampirella thing, and Matt had done a pretty awesome piece of artwork for it. And I wrote a script for something that didn't serve the character well, and we're going to use that again for something else. But we've thought about it. We've reached out to people, but we're all doing tons of different projects, so sure. We have not locked anything down yet.
Yeah. So you talked with Tim. Are you guys? Has he moved to Texas, or are you in Arkansas with him?
Who, Tim?
Yeah.
Oh, he's in Texas from time to time, and he's in Central Texas off and on in between. He moves back and forth between Texas and Arkansas. So he's local.
Okay. 50% local.
Yeah. Local.
Yeah, I'd met up with him in Little Rock at Michael Tierney's store.
Yeah.
Michael's one of our LCS guys. Every other Saturday we have the LCS guys show. There's people who run local comic shops, and we brought them together when COVID first broke out to, talk amongst themselves how they were going to survive all this, and we just kind of kept it going. You have a totally different model from the rest of them now. You join the show time. But.
It's different. My boss bought in volume, so we had at one point 16 pallets of comics that I had to go through. Yeah, it's a lot. 7 per layer, 4 or 5 high, times 16, times 300 books per box. It's a lot of comics. And
so do you go through them and, then offer a deal, or do you just do the 37 cents a pound?
These were things that were purchased before I showed up.
Okay.
So it was, hey, I bought all these comics. You want to go find cool stuff in them? I said, well, it doesn't really work like that, but I'll go take a look and see what I can find. And I'm starting to get the feeling that there's a lot of 90s books and early noughts books in there, and there's a ton of Dead Image and Valiant product in there. And I just get the feeling that in a lot of ways that there's a lot of those books that just get passed from store to store to store. It's kind of this you could sell it the same way you sell zucchini by the pound kind of chunk of product somewhere. And I hope somebody figures out how to sell that someday. And, we may try to put together sets and do something clever with it. But, that stuff was, sort of DOA when it came out the first time around. I'm not sure 25 years did anything for it.
It's been in dollar bins and quarter bins for a very, very long time. But with some of the guys who did that, starting to make a name for themselves again, I've heard that some of the dollar issues are starting to go up in value a bit. Now, they might be $5 books instead of $2 books.
Well, I had friends who worked on a lot of those books. I did a book called Pantheon with Bill Willingham, and a guy that penciled that is a guy named Mike Leake, and Mike Leake drew the hardcore book for Valiant for a while. So, I'm going through, and occasionally I find some of my books in there, and I'm like, oh, look, here's one of Mike's books. All right. It's, we got chunks of it. We got to figure out some way to do something with it too.
Well, good luck with that. I was going to ask you, ever gone through a box and pulled out a holy cow, I can't believe this is in here kind of surprise. But
Yes, I did that a little bit recently. It was another buy that we did. There was a guy who was a huge fan of different artists, and part of the buy was there's a Tim Sale Gray Hulk original commission in watercolor that was done. Looks like it was done about the time that he did Gray Hulk, and that was pretty cool. There was a Sienkiewicz Sandman big illustration in there. That was cool. We found a Nick Fury's Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. 1 that was signed by Stan Lee and Steranko. And I found, once again, Morrison's favorite Harry Chested Love God Batman books.
yes.
There was a Batman 244 in there that was signed by Adams. And I found a Next Men 21 that was signed by Mignola. So that was cool. So, that stuff's there. It just takes a while to get through all of it because, oh my God, it's a lot of books.
Yeah. Last time I went through a box like that, what I had bought, it was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And I don't even have the books I found now, and I kick myself regularly when I talk about it. But yeah, I bought them at discount. Paid like $300 in 1988 when $350 was real money.
Yeah, yeah.
But I pulled out an Amazing Spider-Man 129, Hulk
That's
185. So I was like, yay. And then the electric bill got paid, and then I didn't have them anymore.
We ended up pulling a Hulk 340 out of the stack, and that went off to CGC with a bunch of other books. And early on in the virus, we had CGC's wait time drop down to 15 business days. Now it's back up to about 40. But we just I went through the books, and last time I missed one. Our New Mutants 2 was kind of a dud. It had a staple pop on the centerfold on that book, so it only came back at an 8 point. But everything else I sent off was like 9.4, 9.8 range, and that was kind of cool. It's one of those things where, it's one thing to talk smack, but then when you professionally look at a bunch of books and send them off, and 9 out of 10 come back as money books, it's like, yeah, that's right. I know what I'm doing.
There you go. All right. Well, I know that you have to leave early, so we're going to cut the chat stream short tonight.
Okay.
You being on here, folks in the chat, we do have a link to the Antarctic store. First description line in the description below. Of course, there's only one book out there right now. It's one of the most current ones. They should fill out the catalog some. So go back to your LCS guy to carry Punchline from Antarctic.
Go talk to your local comic shop. Antarctic Press has most of those books in stock. If not, I hear that you can find them online.
And please do tune in tomorrow at 7 p.m. Central when we are going to have Ted Sikora on, who has a book called Punchline and the Vaudevillains.
Yeah, so, I saw that he's doing a crowdfunding thing, right?
He's done the crowdfunding thing for it. Yeah, it's in process right now.
Yeah. So tell him I said hi.
I'll do that. It's been an interesting time for both of you guys right now, and it's a little frustrating. The only one I haven't talked to yet is the guy with the boxing clown. I haven't found the guy from Bronx.
Oh, that's the guy I was thinking of. His crowdfunding thing is going on right now. I got contacted by a guy who did like a Punchline detective book. So I think there's 4 or 5 books, comic books, that have Punchline in the title in a major way at some level. So yeah, weird time to be making comics.
Yeah, well, yeah, they're both boxing clowns. Punchline detective is the one from Bronx, and then Ted Sikora's is a big bruiser of a clown with boxing gloves. He's an ex-boxer. Yeah, he's a spinoff of Tap Dance Killer, which is a really another really good book you guys should check out. So anyway, Bill, glad you came on. We know that.
Thanks for tuning in.
Snoozing. He's been up 20 hours. He's getting some sleep. So we'll check you out later. Thanks for coming.
I'll try to get him on the next one for you.
That'd be great. Thank you.
All right. Adios.